So welcome, Vamadeva. I'd just like to honour Dr. David Frawley. He has been a Vedic scholar for studying now for over 50 years or 40 years. Yes, a long, long time, and has written over 50 books, which is amazing. And I would like to just honour that, although I didn't necessarily start my Ayurvedic studies with you, perhaps all of my knowledge that I have gleaned over the years has really come from a lot of your books and your work. And I feel that you have been a very amazing guiding force without you knowing it all the time, in my own education around Ayurveda and also yoga, of course, too.
Well, so that's very good to know.
Yes.
I'm glad we're reaching people in Australia as well.
Yes, yes. Well, with 50 books, it would be hard not to reach the world, wouldn't it? So yeah, it's a wonderful achievement. And I think the other thing that's really lovely to know about Dr. Frawley is that he's very well respected in India, which is very hard to achieve, I feel. You know, so the Indians really respect him as a scholar of their own tradition. And I feel that that's really something to be respected and valued. So yeah, we're in very good hands here. All right.
Well, we have done a lot of work on the India side because there are many teachings and traditions, whether in the ancient texts and also gurus and temples. So a lot to learn from there, and I have tried to do that as well.
Yeah, it's amazing. So thank you. So we're here today and just acknowledging that our group is doctors, psychiatrists, clinical psychologists, and usually mental health workers and counsellors. And not always are we all well educated in their field of yoga and Ayurveda, these indigenous wisdoms. So we'll try and move slowly in that regard. But we're here to discuss the medicinal uses of cannabis and psychedelics. Well, particularly cannabis in Ayurveda, that would be correct to say, and in yoga and Siddhism, possibly the historical uses of cannabis and psychedelics, but also from a more broader perspective, are they really cannabis and psychedelics that they're talking about in the Vedas and yoga? And so that's something that's debatable and that we'll discuss. And like I said, we're in probably the best hands here to understand the historical past of these medicines, as discussed in the Vedas and in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. So maybe the best way to begin is to describe to our participants in this meeting, what is yoga?
What is yoga? Very simple. We go back to the even Yoga Sutras, Chitta Vritti Nirodha. It is the calming, silencing, dissolving, mastering and transcendence of what we know of as mind to a state of what is called Purusha or Chit Satchitananda, which is the state of the seer or pure consciousness beyond body and mind. In fact, that's the topic of my latest book, Yoga Beyond Body and Mind, because body and mind are instruments for us. And by calming them, making them sattvic, we can turn within and access that transcendent awareness, self-nature, that is beyond birth and death, time and space, and everything merely outward or apparent. And it is the essence of our inner being, not just simply what is happening around us, although it does pervade all of nature. So traditional yoga is basically meditation, and the other limbs are supports or foundations. Even asana is a kind of meditation for the body, pranayama, meditation for the mind, pratyahara, turning the senses within for the inner seeing and inner hearing. And then, of course, the inner aspects of yoga, which are, of course, dharana, concentration, attention, dhyana, contemplative meditation, and samadhi, the silencing, merging of the mind. And the ultimate goal of yoga is the nirvikalpa samadhi, the samadhi in which the mind is more or less dissolved, or it becomes like a mirror. It's an instrument when you need to use it. It's a very wonderful instrument, but it is not you. It doesn't show you reality. It helps you express yourself and adapt to our material, physical world.
Okay. So it's clear that yoga is not just limited to asana by your description here, and asana, for those of us who are new to the term, meaning postures. And yet in the clinical psychology space and the psychology world, and even starting to move into the psychiatry space, we have this idea of sensory motor therapy, or the use of asana as a somatic practice to allow patients to move more clearly into their body. And because of breath work or pranayama, and breath work is popularized now, but traditionally we would call that pranayama in yoga. These are also practices that would aid a person to move more somatically into their body. But we can see that yoga is this huge umbrella that would lead us to a state of
Well,
evolution.
yoga is also awakening the subtle body and even more inner levels of consciousness. You talk about kundalini, chakras, nadis. These are subtle body factors, and they're basically energized to a great extent by prana and also by the mantra. In fact, it's essentially a movement from outward to inward, in the sense that with the asana, you're calming and silencing the body so that it's not an obstacle, and we can keep our awareness within. And pranayama, mind and prana always go together as the powers of knowledge and action. And also the prana holds the emotions. It also holds a lot of memories. So this purification or calming or deepening of the prana is also the basis of the mind. And it's also the foundation for psychology. We use pranayama and also mantra as the foundation for psychology, which, like asana, is silencing the mind, integrating, balancing. I often say mantras are asanas for the mind. And an asana should also be energized with a mantra for the body, so we can move that awareness into the subconscious and even unconscious levels of the body, the organs and the tissues, where many tendencies or samskaras are held. But the goal is that turning within to the Sahasrar, to the Hridaya, and recognizing that the body is our instrument of action in the material world, but our inner being transcends. You are beyond birth, death, time, space, and action, but we have karmas here to work out. So with yoga, we move from the outer to the inner, but the inner is the prime factor. In fact, the bahir anga, the outer limbs of yoga, yamas and yamas, by the way, are the main factors of psychological well-being and behavior. And then asana pranayama, and then dharana dhyana samadhi as the antaranga, or the inner aspect of yoga, which becomes the sanyama, the union of concentration, meditation, and samadhi. But that is the goal. So physical and psychological health are foundational for yoga. But yoga is also about transcending karma, birth, and death. It's a way of self-realization. And of course, there are stages, there's different aspects of our being. We also start where we are, but many dimensions are there. And that's why there are so many aspects to yoga, so many yoga traditions and the gurus going back to the Vedas. And so I've been fortunate enough to meet many of the gurus of India the last 50 years or so, and many of the texts and many of the gurus in the West. And you see there is a lot of asana, but there are also many other things. And these are all part of a single harmony.
Thank you. And so we'll go into what is Oshadi, as described in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, mentioned as a way of attaining samadhi. I'll let you comment the medicinal plants that is mentioned.
It's right here at the beginning of the fourth pada, the Kaivalya pada of the Yoga Sutras, the Oshadi, and their connection to Rasayana, or rejuvenation. And there are also connections with the various elixirs and also what are called the suras, which are also very powerful, subtle energies to work with. And in the Vedas, there is this whole tradition of Soma and Rasayana. And of course, I have a whole book on that called Soma in Yoga and Ayurveda. It's 400 pages long, but it also goes into a lot of the Vedic things. I can say honestly that I've gone through the Rig Veda many times, and the whole Soma hymns I've gone through many, many, many times. So there are many secrets there. And to put things into a very simple language, which is not only Vedic, but also the Tantric and the Hatha Yoga, Raja Yoga, there's a famous chant to Lord Shiva, which is called the Rudram. And Rudra is the aspect of Shiva as fiery and expressive, and Om. And it says there in the Rudram, they talk about Shiva as Agni Somatmakam Jagat, the universe made of Agni and Soma. Agni and Soma are the yin and yang of the Vedas, you might say. Agni is fire, Soma is water, Agni is the sun, Soma is the moon, Agni is the eater of food, Soma is what we take in, Agni is the power of purification, Soma is also the power of deepening awareness, and Soma is said to be the essence of all the plants. All plants carry Soma. Soma, rasa also means a juice or an essence. Sometimes it's also described as something that's prepared as a ferment. But there are said to be outer somas and inner somas. And in that regard, the whole aspect of the Hatha Yoga, Kundalini Yoga consists of the ascent of the Kundalini fire from the Muladhara, the root chakra below, and the descent of the Amrit, the Soma nectar. In fact, the Sahasrar is called Soma, and that's the region of the moon. Agni, the region of the fire, the sun in the heart as the region of the sun. So there are also inner somas, and these are developed. Herbs can help, but they also use a lot of pranayama, mantra, and meditation. In Ayurveda, you've heard of the term ojas, which is the essence of immunity, consists of 8 drops in the heart, but it pervades the entire body and also the subtle body. And also we have the tarpa kapha in the head and the brain. The brain is filled with these secretions, and they all have certain powerful nervine, psychological, emotional effects and reactions. But we can also awaken them through various yoga practices and bhakti and also jnana. So the Vedas and the great yogis talk about the descent of the Soma, the flow of the Soma, the Ananda through the nadis and the chakras as the Kundalini Shakti rises from below. And there are certain Soma-like plants that can aid in that, can also aid in rejuvenation, particularly rejuvenation of the brain and the mind. And nature is also filled with many herbs and ancient native traditions throughout the world. Shamanic traditions have their sacred plants, and some of these have mind-altering actions, but there are also many other ways to get the Soma to flow and also change the mind. Devotional chanting, for example, the drums, the music, the dance, the incense, awakening to the tanmatras. In fact, it's said that art should be a form of Soma, at getting to the essence, the nectar, the ananda behind things. And pranayama can also give us an ananda born of shanti. And in deep meditation, letting go of the mind is a big troublemaker. Sometimes, I hate to say it, but often our minds are the worst terrorist. We have to deal with all their doubts and worries and fears and anxieties. But the mind can also be made to have the Soma flow through it. And what is Samadhi is the flow of Ananda or Soma through the subtle body and the mind, and connecting it to us with that flow in the entire universe, not just in the plants, it's also in the sky. In the Vedas, we pray for Shanti from everywhere, from the waters, the mountains, the sun, the moon. The entire universe is full of Shanti, but we have to open ourselves up to it. It's not a political factor. It's there if we are willing to contemplate. And sometimes they say that Soma and these transformative elixirs grow on the Manasarovar, or the mountain, the high mountain lake of the mind, like lotuses, which is a kind of meditation. But there are also various herbs, some known, some forgotten. Cannabis is also mentioned at some point as a type of soma, but there are many types. We have somas prepared. Soma is often connected with grita or ghee, madhu or various honey, sugar type formations. And it is also connected to certain subtle energies that one brings out and chanting that goes along with it. And there are, of course, various monastic orders right now in the Kumbh Mela. You have the Arjuna Akada, which is the largest of the organizations of the monks. I think they have maybe close to 2 million sadhus, but I know there's more than 1 million. The main guru behind it is Swami Avdesh Ananda. You can get his wisdom every day if you just go to where he puts that out. Their guru is the Rishi Dattatreya, the Avadut who lives in nature in the wilderness. And the Naga sadhus often don't wear clothes, so they just put the bhasma on their bodies. They live out in nature, they wander through the Himalayas, they may sleep in trees and all the rest of it. They stay at certain temples, go to certain festivals. They have used cannabis for pain relief, for the arthritic issues, for adjusting to the heat, for calming the mind. And in Ayurveda, cannabis is a very common nervine, antispasmodic, and anti-pain. There's a very famous Ayurvedic formula, which is based on the bilwa plant, bilvashtakam, and it's as important as triphala, but for the calming and the getting rid of the pain, antispasmodic action, it also has some cannabis in it as well. And in Indian traditions, opium has been used throughout the world for a long time. There are many herbs used for calming the nervous system. And in the Ayurvedic texts, including Sushrut, they talk about various soma plants. Soma is sometimes said to be a plant that climbs trees. It's nowhere explained as anything like a mushroom, but they talk about many soma plants that grow in these lakes and in the high countries. There's the famous Brahma Kamal. There's some related plants in the Sahasrar type species, things, and also things that grow up at tree line, and also special preparations with certain havans, fire offerings, chanting of certain mantras, using of sacred water, again, using of milk, cream, all these things. And so a lot of this is kept secret, and a lot of it has been lost over time. But the idea of soma is there. Soma is sometimes differentiated from sura, which is more alcohol. And it's also the talking of the development of the inner somas. So you use the outer somas to help awaken the inner somas. And Vedas talk about many, and the somas are identified with the meters, the mantric coherence of the chants. There are 7 main meters in the Rig Veda. There are many more beyond this. And these meters or chandas are also said to be Soma. So there's also the mantric-based Soma that can help with the flow of the Amrit, the Tarpic Kapha, in the brain and the nervous system. And there are just simply what we call Medhya Rasayanas, Rasayana herbs that can help rejuvenate the mind. And some are very commonly used in Ayurveda, like ashwagandha, shatavari, bala, shankapushpi, shilajit, and also in various special preparations, brahmi, mandukaparni. And these are very important today because our brain and mind and nervous system is getting depleted by all the electrical, media, urban stimulation that goes around us. And so we need to know how to access our inner Soma as well, which is ultimately the Ananda, but Ananda has its way of moving into everything. And you'll see in different native traditions, they have their sacred plants, but they also honor them and use them in sacred ceremonies, special times of the year, special times of the day, as preceded by various forms of internal purification. Some may involve vomiting, some may involve fasting, some may involve, like asana, a certain soma flows when you can hold an asana very deeply and calmly. So it's part of all of that. And today we have a tendency to turn things into recreational factors or just kind of getting high. And so that you may be using some soma factors, but to really access them, you have to approach them at a deeper level. Some psychologists have recognized for years that there are certain benefits of some psychedelics as taken with the right preparation, environment, and association for letting go of the toxic memories that are the main factor carrying down the mind, for opening up our perception, the windows of perception. In fact, in yoga, we also do the dharana, or the concentration, because after a while, then your whole awareness will open up. In fact, it's said if you can focus the mind on a single point, on the infinitesimal, that is the doorway to the infinite. Once you reach that place, then everything will be new and fresh. So all these things are connected. There are also different types of waters and juices that have certain effects, proper hydration, certain teas, and of course, quite a variety of herbs. And one thing we have to remember, that herbs have a strong pranic basis. Obviously, they grow in nature. And that means that they also can work more directly on our prana. A lot of the chemical drugs, of course, they don't have prana. They have powerful effects. In fact, even Rasayana is a synonym in ancient literature for certain powerful forms of chemistry. But they're working from the outside. And in the process, they can weaken our own harmonic factors, our own inner coherence, and make us then dependent upon substances. I sometimes say what junk food does to the body, junk impressions does to the mind, but also chemical factors are of temporary usage. And of course, there are also organic chemicals and organic ways of preparing them. So many of the rasayanas and even the elixirs for the mind are also made in ghee or honey or the juices of certain herbs for that way. So there's much to be explored there. And at least modern psychology is recognizing the importance of certain yogic activities, pranayama, mantra, meditation, asana, being out in nature, pilgrimage, doing your asanas out in nature, contacting nature's intelligence, because nature's intelligence connects us to the universal intelligence, the Ishvara principle that the Yoga Sutras talks about. And that then we can connect ourselves directly to not simply the outer internet, but to the cosmic mind. You know, the rishis said we can travel throughout the entire universe without leaving our cave. Because we can access the cosmic mind often through looking out in space. Even if you do sanyama on the sun, the moon, certain things are revealed on certain planets, Jupiter, Venus, certain stars, polar star, Chitra, etc. So today we also, with all of our technology and its benefits, we still need a yogic awareness so that we use things in the right way and also awaken not just artificial intelligence, but universal consciousness to guide us and to make science into something connected to the cosmic mind.
Actually, it reminds me of a teaching that you often give on Satya Buddhi. So we are the universe and the universe is within us. Would you like to say it any better?
Well, if we go back to Upanishads, the Chandogya, they say in the heart, spiritual heart, there is the small space, the Dahara Akasha, which is not simply a small space, it's a place of pure, focused awareness in which the entire universe is held, and you can move into that, into the entire conscious universe. Everything in the universe is conscious in various ways, not just simply in a dull way. Take, for example, rocks. Rocks are actually, to a great extent, the geology is the product of the stars. It's also the product of an Agni in the earth going on for millions of years. So they carry certain celestial forces and powers of eternity or longer time cycles. So the spiritual heart, or the Hridaya, is more central than the Sahasrar, because it holds all the chakras within it. It's also connected via the Sushumna. So it's very important that we are able to connect with and recognize that. It's even said in the Yoga Sutras, the mind, the prana, even the vak, the mantra, all arises from and goes back to the Hridaya, which is actually the causal body, even beyond the chakras, connecting to, as Upanishads say, the Hridaya as the source or the origin or the basis of the self, and moving back into the cave of the heart. And actually going into caves in nature was actually a very part of mystical worship.
That's great. We found a few beautiful caves in India to move back into the cave of the heart.
Well, India doesn't have in the mountains so many caves as certain other countries. Actually, New Mexico, we have some significant caves, but don't neglect the cave in your heart. Also, you see in the caves the Shivalingas and all those forces.
Although it's a bit simple to say this, it kind of reflects the modern science we have on the heart brain, that our heart is really governing the operation before the brain cognizes. So I think the Heart Math Institute is good on that. But just to put it in that Western framework, it shows that the heart is the main governance site.
In fact, the heart is sometimes also said to be they say that the heart is the sun and the brain is like the moon. It reflects the light of the sun. So that is also very important to know, but it's not the emotional heart. I mean, the emotional heart is an outer aspect of it. It is the spiritual heart. That's why it is also the source of bhakti. It is also the source where your Ishta Devata, where the Devatas dwell within you. So, and Devatas are not this strange worship of images. They are recognizing the Devatas or the cosmic power. There's a Devata or cosmic power in the earth, the Mother Earth, in the sun, the moon, the wind. Hanuman is the great deity, Devata of the Vayu. That's why he can be as large or small or move as fast as he wants. He's the son of Vayu. So there's ways of accessing these cosmic powers at a yogic level. And at a certain level, you have to go beyond technology. I'll just explain that very simply. Technology is part of the outer aspect of life. It's also something mechanical. or as we say, it's mathematical and quantifiable. That's where its role is, giving us a better understanding of quantities and correlating information and so forth. But the inner reality also, as Vedas say, is beyond name, form, and number, non-quantifiable, the unknown, the immeasurable, what is beyond names, what cannot be reduced to even the best algorithm in the world. I'm not putting the technology down. I'm very happy to do books on a computer. For years, I did, when I was young, I did them on a typewriter. It was definitely much more of a struggle. But we need to recognize that dimension that is beyond number. And also, prana and the mind bring about certain chemical secretions in the brain, but they also transcend the brain. So we also have to remember that consciousness is beyond the body and mind, and also it is beyond the brain. And here by consciousness, we don't just mean any type of awareness. We mean a deeper self-awareness. We live in a self-aware universe, and yoga is allowing that self-aware universe to manifest within us. And our human consciousness should be a form of self-awareness, not in an egoistic sense, but in seeing how everything that we look at is looking back at us as well as part of our own being.
And so just bringing it back to the use of cannabis and possibly psychedelics or medicinal plants in this way to experience that complete ego dissolution for some people. Not everyone will have that experience of, the mind quietening and perhaps the ego dissolving, but it's definitely written up in the scientific research that it's a possibility both through cannabis and DMT and not to mention others. What is your wisdom on this topic? Because it might be a temporary insight that may not be sustained.
Well, the point is that these were largely used in an initiatory way to show people other potentials in the mind and the consciousness that they might not otherwise be able to access, and to create a circumstance, a time, a special chanting, etc., to bring that out. And that is how I view it in certain traditional circumstances. It is initiatory and can help people open up to those dimensions. However, to really manifest and live in those dimensions, the deeper yoga practices are also very helpful. In fact, that way, yogic consciousness is moment by moment awareness. It's not a high followed by a low. It is a mode of transcendence. So I can see how these things have a certain value. Of course, myself came from the 60s generation, but we also recognize that a lot of those things could show us something, but we found through Kriya Yoga, through mantra, through other methods, a more direct way and simpler way to do that. And there are many other, of course, complications going on, but certainly these Ayurvedic herbs and rasayanas are very important, rasayanas for the nervous system, etc. These also help support yoga and even psychology, the importance of sattvic diet, sattvic lifestyle. Vedanta also teaches us that nature is sattvic in nature. However, we human beings are more rajasic and tamasic. That gives us some power, but at the same time, we can lose that harmony, and that's why a lot of the yogis went back into nature, and a lot of these deeper sadhanas, whether they use plants or not, whether they'd use asana or not, they also had as their goal connecting to these cosmic power. Ishvara, the Adi Guru of yoga, is that universal intelligence, and he is accessed through mantra. His vachaka, his indicator, is Om or Pranava. The Vedas are said to be the manifestations of Om or Pranava as well, and the entire Sanskrit language. And remember also, we all know the power of music and chanting and song to affect our consciousness and to bring in a certain ananda as well. And so we need to apply these in a certain context and not just kind of use them as a way out, but also we might say as a way in. And I would like to see also, there has been, they found with testing of use of mantras in Sanskrit language, it does improve the brain function. And there are also certain yogic, tratika, holding the gaze in certain places, whether it's the moon, whether it's fire. There's a whole set of sensory therapies. I'll be talking about that in one of my upcoming publications as well. Yoga connects us to the inner seeing, the inner hearing, and all the inner senses. If we say something touches my heart, we don't mean that somebody is putting their hand on my chest. We mean that there's a deeper level of touch than outward. If we say something that this place has a beautiful fragrance, there may be flowers or incense, but there's something more than that. Or if we say, I hear what you say, we don't mean I necessarily hear it audibly. We mean I get the real meaning behind what you say. So there are these also inner somas and connections and awakening of inner senses. Now, that's why you even see when native people or even in psychedelics, all these yantras will come out for them. All these geometrical designs come out. They're explained well in the tantric text relative to the devatas, because these subtle forces are out there in nature, but if our inner eye is not open, we don't see them. And that's why a lot of these ancient cultures developed all these larger designs. Graham Hancock has talked about some of this in his work. I helped him with one of the first things he did back in 2001 on the flooded kingdoms of the Ice Age on the India side. But whenever you move into a deeper concentration or samadhi, you see these deva lokas, you see these dream realms, you see these subtle powers of sound, these nadas or vibrations, these doorways or openings, the inner world of consciousness, the subtle body, and you can also move beyond the physical world. In fact, sometimes they ask the question, like in Peru, you have these very giant designs done on the mountains. How could they do that? Why would they do it? Well, even the shamans in their subtle body can go into the eagle, the body of the eagle. And in your subtle body, you can do the Kechari mudra, you move through space. So you don't necessarily need to.
You should describe what the Kechari mudra is, and your pronunciation is better than mine for Gilbert. So it goes up.
Yes, again, the Kechari mudra, like the rest of yoga, has outer, pranic, and inner aspect. Kechari means literally moving in space. And there's a point at the soft palate of the mouth, way in the back, which is called actually the place of Soma. And the yogis then learn how to move the tongue backwards. The tongue is also the basis of talking, taste, so many things. And they say that that soft palace of the mouth, this is said actually in the Upanishads, I believe it's the Aitareya, that is where Indra, the seer, the Purusha, he comes in through the Adipati Marma, the Semanta at the top of the head. Then he moves into the soft palate. That's where the mind is control. And then he takes his basis in the heart. So through that particular Soma place, then you get power over the mind, but also the power to move through space, but also the inner space, what is called the Chittakasha. So actually the Kechari mudra is very much connected to even the nirvikalpa state of samadhi. So it's a very prominent kriya in a number of traditions. Sometimes it's just something taken inwardly. Sometimes it's something done more in the heart. But what you can do is you liberate your prana simply from body consciousness. And then by moving into the subtle body, then you can access the realms of space and the subtle worlds. There's many secrets like that in the yoga practices and traditions.
And I feel it's wise to sort of acknowledge that psychedelics can take people and shunt them out of their bodily experience into the subtle body and then to those realms that we discuss. One of the psychiatrists I was chatting to the other day, they wish to use, and many people will use this perhaps in their therapy, art therapy, sound, and so nada yoga or art therapy. And I suggested, well, maybe people could come back and if they've seen these yantras, they could, mimic them. So these are like, I might be incorrect in saying this, and Dr. Frawley will correct me, but they're like mandalas, and you would, use chalk or paint. And so they're pictures of the sacred geometry that you might see. Could you correct me if I've said anything wrong there about yantras?
The entire universe is pervaded by the sacred mathematics. The yantra, you have this specifically in the Sri yantra, and there's a huge sadhana which goes with that. And the Sri yantra is also Mount Meru, the cosmic mountain. You visualize it within you. It also has the ascending Shakti and the descending Shiva force, and connects us to the devatas, the different lokas and realms of the universe. And this is then the power of a dharana. One of the problems today, because we have no dharana shakti or power of attention, we can be taken in by anything, we can be disturbed by anything, and we get addicted to stimulation from the outside of a media nature. And that's why our attention span is so small, and that is why our memory, our deeper memory, is being lost. We need to reclaim the power of attention. A mantra is a great place to do that, or trataka. And that's also the doorway to the inner yoga. And when the inner vision opens, then you can begin to see these subtle aspects of nature. Each flower is also yantra. The chakras are also yantras. They're also flowers or lotuses. You are not just a human being living in your own body by yourself. Of course, there's lots of other people and houses around us, but each aspect of our nature is connected to the universe. That's why they say your prana, or your breath, is the cosmic vayu. In fact, in the yogic thought, prana is not the breath. The breath is a manifestation of prana. The lungs breathe. Actually, you don't breathe. And so prana is actually the energy of the universe. Whatever energy is out there in the universe, light, gravity, all these things are certain forces of energy and movement, and they're all alive in some way. They have a beginning or an end, but they also carry a life and a consciousness. We are not the only living beings. We are not the only conscious beings. We are mental beings, as I think Sri Aurobindo said. We are a mentalized material being, or we are embodied consciousness. And yoga teaches us how to allow our consciousness also to transcend, so that we can reclaim the cosmic aspect of our being.
Thank you. So because we have Western psychiatrists and psychologists in training here, and who are very interested in the contemplative practices and sciences of both yoga and Buddhism, I thought it might be lovely if you could describe perhaps the way we might integrate yoga into psychology, or yoga psychology, or the aspect of Bhuta Vidya in Ayurveda, Ayurvedic psychiatry or Ayurvedic psychology. I mean, it's a huge part.
We shouldn't forget Carl Jung. He also used the mandalas. He also studied, anima and animus were originally called Shiva Shakti. And he also worked with the Taoist and also the Tibetans and the Indic tradition. You also find that there are a lot of mystical traditions in Europe, even throughout the Middle Ages and the ancient Greeks. You had the Neoplatonists, but Plotinus was somebody who went to India, and there was also a lot of the yogic Buddhist, so-called, those influences also there. And what the traditions have, the Dharmic traditions have, the Jainas also, they all emphasize meditation and samadhi. We had had an organization in India for years called the India Foundation, and we have what are called Dharma Dhamma conferences where we bring Hindu and Buddhist leaders together, and Tibetans, Theravadins, different branches of yoga. And I had a number of conversations with Lama Samten, who is the main teacher at Sarnath and close to the Dalai Lama. And he said, it made a very interesting point. He said, all the Dharmic traditions have different philosophies, but they all recognize that the ultimate truth is only known in samadhi, and it transcends all words. As Upanishads say, where mind and speech turn back where they cannot go. So there is a very important need to study that and to recognize within us, we are not just a body or a social being. We have a karmic being. We have many bodies and many lives, and we have many other layers of awareness. I mean, artists touch upon these in certain inspirational dreams. Even scientists have made some of their greatest discoveries when they were least thinking about them, and so forth. So awakening those, and these Dharmic meditation traditions have had a lot of experience there, and they've always had open debate and discussion. So psychology needs to move into that as well and recognize that the brain is an outer instrument of consciousness, but consciousness doesn't die with the body. Even prana doesn't die with the body. They move on. And the yogis can even move into the subtle body. Yogananda talks about it quite a bit, even when they are physically alive. And we need to then unite cosmology and consciousness. We have saptalokas in the Vedic tradition. We have idea that there's realms of pure mind, pure consciousness, subtle beings, and all of this. So there are many points of connection. Curiously, from my window here, off the deck, I can see Los Alamos, where they invented the nuclear bomb. We're up in the mountains, so we can see the lights of some of the Los Alamos labs. Sometimes we see other things, and I'm not saying anything positive or negative about that technology, but the fact is it is there, and it is connected. There are also inner technologies. And though we have studied DNA and we've studied all these subtle chemicals, mantras also have those subtle forces, and even at a deeper level. So we need to look into the Rishi traditions, the mystical traditions, and even again, native traditions, because they live in the universe. They don't just live in an office or, in a building. So there's much positive we can do. But the unfortunate thing is, as Yogananda said, that we live in a scientific age, electrical age, but science is a two-edged sword. Whatever science invents, however beneficial, someone else can also weaponize it. So we also have to bring the sacred into science. And I also want to make a statement is, Maharishi always talked about the art and science of being. The universe is not just a mathematically measurable substance or a set of forces. It is also an art. Look at all the different forms of art and flowers and snowflakes and crystals. So we shouldn't think that we can just simply measure it and control it from the outside. We need to link and understand that deeper Ananda.
So, yes, I just wanted to perhaps go back a little bit. Gosh, there are so many interesting things in what you just said there. But I wouldn't mind your opinion on the use of psychedelics to access that state of samadhi, even if it's a low-level samadhi. Do you think it would be safe to say that possibly someone using these medicinal plants would access a state of samadhi, even if at a low level?
Well, they also talk about samadhis in the Yoga Sutras as being of the different gunas, tamasic, rajasic. Even deep sleep is our natural samadhi. And what are people getting addicted to on a lot of these sedative drugs and pain relieving drugs? It's a kind of samadhi, but it's tamasic in nature. A lot of rajasic samadhis through movement, exhilaration, noise, and so forth, passion. And yoga wants to cultivate a sattvic samadhi in which there's not dullness or disturbance to the body and the mind. Now, as I said, I see these medications as having initiatory value, but should not breed dependency and should be linked to other forms of heightened awareness, which is samadhi, whether not just music and chanting, nature, cosmic mind, so many things, and treating them sacredly as native people do, I think it can be of some initiatory value. We did some of that to a certain extent in the 60s. I haven't been involved in it in quite a long time, but I have worked a bit with the Medhya Rasayanas in Ayurveda.
And we might need to describe what those are just once again. So do you mind popping that into sort of English terminology? So for the brain.
They're rejuvenative agents for the mind and the brain. And they are not necessarily psychedelics, or they not necessarily have narcotic properties. They often aim at a deeper calm and space, or also ojas. Ojas also gives us that's the inner essence power. That's also very important for psychological immunity as well as physical immunity. So it is important to work with these forces, but to also do that in a sacred way, and also recognize and use them very properly, because there has always been a tendency to mix and match and change doses and many other things. And the important thing is then to have a sadhana or a way of yoga practice that can build up on the power, whether it's the power of the plants, the prana, a concentration, mantra, fixing the gaze, awakening our perception. Sometimes I tell people, just, invert the body for a while, block it, removes the apana. The world sometimes looks better upside down than it does. And then
forgive me for interrupting. So just to put it in a different context, sometimes we would say inversions change the psychology, they alter the consciousness because they make face us our fear, and we flip upside down. And so we have to see the world in a different way, a different order. So
we have to know how to use our senses in a creative way. See the big and see something large in the small. For example, we find very tiny rocks above tree line that have very tiny flowers also by them, very tiny rock gardens. Meditate on those. See the large in the small, in the small, in the large. Have a certain, like the 5 pranas are also doing that. Samana centers you. Vyana allows the mind to expand. The senses have many subtle qualities, even the motor organs. Don't get caught in this kind of conditioned pattern memory box where you always do the same thing and where you get caught up in programmed things. You see, the mind is a programmed system. Brain is also programmed. To some degree, it's necessary. You have certain habitual things that you do, but consciousness is beyond programming. We can reach consciousness through mantra because mantra reprograms the mind. In fact, the mind programs itself after its dominant thoughts and dominant perceptions, sensations, emotions, and of course, its dominant sounds. So if a mantra is your dominant sound, that mantra then is going to permeate the mind. And an interesting rule, if an energy dominates 50% of the mind plus, it will take over all the rest of it. So that will then integrate the mind. So a mantra is there to make the mind sattvic and to break up negative thought patterns, emotion patterns. That's one of the main keys of the Ayurvedic psychology and the yoga psychology.
So I'm going to rather rudely talk about something I've seen in my own practice, but I saw like a yantra for the Shri mantra, or just a picture of what that looked like. And I was like, oh, this is a protective mantra. And then strangely, I was listening to something you were saying the next day, and you said, oh, Shri is a protective mantra. And I was very happy to hear that this kind of premonition that I've had was, supported by the wisdom that you were presenting the next day. So maybe it would be important to understand that mantras are definitely shut down the default mode network in a kind of scientific context, which is what you've said all along. But we have mantras that are not just limited to Om, but Shreem is one of them, and this is a protective mantra, and for often not given, it would be correct to say of Shri because it's a little bit more protected. But please go ahead.
A whole book called Mantra Yoga and Primal Sound, where I discuss the energetics of all these main mantras. Shreem is also Lakshmi's mantra.
Yes.
It's a mantra of the moon. It's a mantra that increases fertility and nurturing and devotion. Lunar energy, cooling, calming. There's Hrim, which is the solar mantra, which is also connected to the Hridaya, or the spiritual heart, which is the power of the yoga Shakti. And it is the Devi Pranava. It is what the goddesses use that awakens the goddess energy. My wife, Yogini Shambhavi, has very beautiful chants along with these. Or you have a mantra like Kreem, that is for Kriya, for action, for movement, for change. Mantras have a Shakti or a power. Kleem, K-L-E-E-M, is the Akarshana Shakti. It causes attraction. It is devotion. It draws everything within, magnetic energies. So these mantras then are connected to different deities. Goddess herself, Devi, is Vak Shakti, or the power of speech and mantra. You might say the logos, as it were, the divine creative force. We just had Vasant Panchami, the day of Saraswati, and that's where in the schools, the young children, particularly the girls, bring their Saraswati dolls to class and recognize Saraswati is also the tongue. And so yoga teaches us that it's very important that you honor Saraswati in your speech.
Yes, of course. Also, please go ahead. I interrupted.
Well, there's also what is called Mauna Yoga, and we have to also purify our speech. Just as you have mantras to purify the speech, you also have asanas to purify the body. If your speech is disturbed and toxic and aggressive and all of that, then that affects all the sense and motor organs and the body.
So practice Mauna Yoga, just... I'm very grateful for that. And I thought it might be just nice to recognize, as your books so beautifully do, that depending on the qualities of one's mind, the mantra is different. So we have heating mantras for a mind that might be a bit lethargic or kapha in nature, heavy in water and earth element. And we have mantras like Klim that increase the kapha element, don't they? So depending on the nature or the quality of one's mind and the elements that pervade their mind, then we would choose a mantra that is suitable for mind and heart.
You may choose a mantra and a devata, or even a force. If you're doing very powerful heating pranayama and you need that, you can visualize this, bringing the solar energy up and down. And there are also certain devatas that can be brought in, but we always want to go back to a place of calm and peace. It's not just, you need it's like in asana, you need some rajasic asanas, but you should end in sattva guna.
This means that we should enliven the system, wake up the heart, sympathetic nervous system response, and then calm it all down, parasympathetic nervous system response. So thank you. I suppose that leads to my final question. And we in shamanism, which takes its roots from Buddhism and yoga, as I understand from the late George Feuerstein, Please correct me if you see it differently. But in shamanism, we have a deity or a spirit behind the plant. And we also have this in yoga and tantric Buddhism, or maybe Indo-Tibetan Buddhism after yoga. So yes, if you would like to speak on that. So my understanding is that Lord Shiva is behind cannabis. And what would that mean for somebody who's taking that medicinally? Or to have an experience where the ego completely dissolves in a medical setting with a clinical psychologist. Or we might have Tulsi, for example, and that's a Lakshmi, deity of Lakshmi is behind Tulsi. So yes, and one of the other ladies I interviewed who does the intersection of Siddhism and shamanism, Dr. Isa Gadachi, she speaks about how the plant medicine continues its work even long after it's ingested. So that plant remains with you doing its work. So any commentary that you have on any of those topics?
Well, first of all, what you've just said, you see the plants, that prana can then get into the lubrication of the nervous system. Yes. But that's also why a number of plants are prepared in ghee, which is connected to the nervous system, or other certain plants. Yeah, the shamanistic and the yogic traditions have crossed over quite a bit. And even what do the Brahmins do? Sacred fires, sacred chants, all these different invocation of devatas, connection to the plants, the animals, sacred plants, and all of that. And shamana also, shaman is also connected to shamana, which is calming. So that tradition is there. Of course, the Georg Forstein, by the way, was a great friend of mine. We did some books together and also knew each other quite well. And of course, in Tibet, you have the Banpo tradition, and you also have the Taoist tradition. These are also connected to yoga and also the shamanistic traditions. And you also have similar sacred rocks and all the rest of it. So they are connected, although even in Tantra, we talk about that the practices can be used for sattva, rajas, or tamas. There are those who use these, we always talked about magic, or you might say that, but they use these subtle powers for mind control, or overcoming their enemies, or gaining certain benefits for themselves. That's simply human nature, because these things do have power. But the ultimate goal of all the traditions is a higher consciousness. And that is where everything is a yoga or a union with the universe. We know a number of the Native American traditions here too. And it's sad how the Native traditions, whether in the Americas, Africa, the Pacific Islands, were so demonized and so reduced to, all this funny black magic and so forth. But how could these Polynesians take on this little catamaran, cross the Pacific Ocean, or go from Madagascar to Easter Island? They have beautiful chants. Hawaiian language is a very beautiful vowel-based mantric language. So we have to take a deeper vision of these things and learn to understand the wisdom of those who have stayed in harmony with nature and who have that capacity to bring that to us, and plants are a very important part of it. Traditional people, nomads you might call in nature, they have to know all kinds of plants, far more than any doctor or herbalist, and they have to know when they're ripen and when to pick them. It connects them also with the universe and Mother Nature, so that you're feeling your mind is part of everything. And most of our psychological problems are born of ego and isolation. If we open our minds to the cosmic mind, if we cultivate the Atma within, then these things can be overcome. Of course, it takes time. We have our environment to deal with. There are devatas everywhere. They're divine, sacred powers. You're not worshiping simply a form. As you know, going to a Hindu temple, they do what is called the prana pratishta of the murti, or the chief form or deity form that is worshipped there. And there they use all these factors, bathing the murti in ghee, milk, honey, yogurt, doing all kinds of chanting, adding 1,000 names and flowers, and then reaching a stage where the deity is able to come into that form. Then they do the arati, or the fire offering, and the lights. So it's not just worshiping a form, it's knowing how to bring consciousness and ananda into the form. And in that regard, each one of us is a manifestation of the divine. I'm not saying we should be egoistic about that, but we should learn to honor that divine force within us, or learn to bring it from our natural environment into us. You know, the sun is in the heart, the moon is in the mind, prana is the breath. They have so many metaphors that they do. So we recognize that we are meant to be a manifestation of Purusha, Atma, which is the universal consciousness. We are meant to be the embodied being in which the universal consciousness can take birth and manifest, which is what Upanishads say. We should not forget that. We may have a long ways to go. Evolution is slow, but there are many secrets there we can access. And once we open the mind to that deeper yogic awareness, perception, creativity, our environment will become magical. Shambhavi is very good at, now all the deer come to her. She has about, I think, 5 doe and 4 bucks that come regularly, and even come in the window and look. And I remember she saying that not too long ago, the deer was coming up to the window and looking at her. And he said, "What's going on?" And she realized she hadn't put food in his bowl.
Okay.
In the atmosphere, the clouds are alive. So let's remember all of that.
Yeah. I suppose I just felt it was important to honor these indigenous wisdoms and just notice, you know, that we do have these connections to nature. So when the plant, no matter how it's been changed in the form that it's been given, because obviously, you know, it's not in its original form at all once it's been given in the capsule, there is that we can call upon those sacred powers and the devatas behind the plant. Obviously, not everyone's going to have the interest in perhaps the aspect of Hinduism or yoga or Ayurveda that you and I do, but that they could, just honor that there's a bigger force at play.
Well, you know, in Ayurveda, we have various ways of preparing plants, and various special ways of whether it's heating them, whether it's combining them with other herbs, with other juices, and then we have formulations like Chyavanprash, we have asavas and arishtas, where there's certain ferments that go on, herbal jellies and so on, because these hold the plant energies in different ways. If a plant energy is dried up too much, then of course a lot of the rasa, the essence or the soma, gets lost. But yes, that is important.
And perhaps one interesting complaint that I've heard from people who do take medical cannabis or who have encountered it somehow is that it's really strong. So there's something about it that's done in the manufacturing process that might be, you know, a lot more potent than how it might be Ayurvedically prepared, which is a bit different, obviously, and perhaps a little bit natural to its form.
And also in Ayurveda, they seldom use it simply by itself.
Yeah.
It's combined with other herbs that have related or strengthening type properties. And I have heard that from some other people, that the chemically prepared cannabis causes more disturbance than the naturally prepared. That's something I've heard. I haven't taken that and can't verify for that. But it is important that we do recognize the prana and the consciousness of the plant. And just like the human being, just as we're not brain chemistry only, the plant is not just phytochemistry only. In fact, that's a manifestation of a deeper rasa or juice. And if you'll notice in the human body, you need the plasma to carry the prana. So plants also have to have that liquid. It's not necessarily the juice of the plant, but certain preparations, whether it's water, warm water, preparation in honey, aloe vera, so many things.
Yeah. It's a wise consideration. And also the energy that's gone into creating that medicine sometimes might be perpetuated by, financial gains. And so maybe the toxicity that someone might feel from the medical cannabis is because the intention behind giving the medicine is not correct in the first place, isn't it?
Yes, that's also there. And Ayurveda also has a certain regard for homeopathy and for taking things and for various ways of empowering certain herbs and formulas. Sometimes it's making them even smaller or more concentrated,
Okay.
potentizing them. So learning how to energize the herbs that you're taking, take it in a sacred way. And the interesting thing is also about smoke. Smoke is, of course, going into the lungs, but it's also connecting you to the atmosphere. The feather headdresses of the native people. That's also a way of connecting to the space and the air and the birds in the air. The hamsa. Hamsa is also the bird of the prana. So we need to recognize and honor these things, but also we have to make sure not to overdo certain things. Alcohol, a little wine, as actually Ayurveda says, can be helpful for certain digestive conditions. A certain thing, smoke, can also help the lungs to some degree, but something very hot, you can burn the lungs. And other toxic things can be done. So we have to do things in a very gentle way, respecting our inner being.
Yeah, right. Just from reading your books, just a memory is that tobacco can be good for asthma. And also, I think in our email exchange, you mentioned that cannabis, I imagine smoked, can also be good for asthma. Is that correct to say? It would be.
Well, first of all, the kind of the smoking of the tobacco industry developed a more chemically powerful and dangerous form of tobacco. There are a lot of native varieties of tobacco that have much more calming effect. It's also, to some extent, the way in which they are taken. So that is also there to be considered. And if you have a very disturbed environment and lifestyle, then it also can kind of throw these natural forces off also. And the cannabis was also used, like with some of the sadhus, at a certain ritual or at a certain time of the day, or when they're out in nature. In Ayurveda, it's also just used medicinally for its pain relief and other factors. And a lot of things which are medicinal in excess can cause problems. It's interesting to note that what are we all getting addicted to in modern medicine is opiates. Opium is also a very ancient plant that was used in a lot of traditions for calming and relieving pain without, addicting or, just simply, taking down the mind, you might say. So there are these plants, and they do need to be used in a special way, and they can be overused and they can be abused.
Yes. Yes, I've been with a Hindu, I suppose you could say he was a spiritual teacher. And part of his teachings were to use tobacco ceremonially, and people would go into spontaneous kriyas using this tobacco. It was an unusual environment, and I was only in his presence for a short amount of time. But yes, they were definitely taking the tobacco, and there would be that experience where people would go into spontaneous.
Well, because look, it's working on the prana, it's working on the lungs, it's close to the heart.
Yeah.
And that also means the tobacco people, the commercial tobacco people use may be affecting those things in a different way.
Yes, actually, I should be honest. I'm not telling the full story. So he would allow it to be liquefied, and the person would take it up the nostrils, as we would do in Ayurveda as well for certain issues with sinuses, and so it would be affecting more the higher centers. So maybe that's why, but it wasn't smoked. Yeah, it was taken up, and so yes, they were. It was crazy wisdom. But it definitely, I believe, and I don't know enough about it, but I believe in the shamanic traditions, it's used as a smoke ceremony as well.
And there's also sacred waters they have from certain rivers, from certain places. It's
Yes.
very interesting. There's this Babaji's cave up in the Himalayas, up above Ranikhat and Dwarahat area. And it has a great cave there. And so once we found not too far from the cave, a little spring.
Okay.
We didn't take much of it, but we took a little
Okay.
bit.
Okay.
Just don't underestimate even the power of sacred waters. And waters can also be energized with mantra. Take
Yes.
something like Ganga, like even Kumbh Mela. It's been energized by the mantras, the flowing mantras of the Ganga is the river of the mantra. Ganga is also the river of the yoga of knowledge, and Yamuna is the river of the bhakti yoga. But there's ways of energizing things. That's why we say you have to have a sacred space in your house, use of incense, sacred flowers, herbs, because the sacred space will support meditation. But if there's only a bunch of noise and disturbance and emotional ups and downs going on in your house, that's also permeating the walls, and it's also creating a certain psychic space. So there's also the art of creating certain psychic spaces. And I think psychologists need to teach people who are disturbed how to do that. That's why visiting temples or sacred places can be very helpful, but there's often a lot of stored negative emotional energy in the habitual things or negative things that have happened in a certain environment, room, or place. So let us work with all these powers.
Yeah. And I suppose you could use a mantra, or you could use some incense, or you can use the power of your intention to clear that space.
Well, power of intention is very important because sankalpa is the root of the mind. Sankalpa vikalpa is the mind, and changing sankalpa. That's just not simply affirmation, but creating a higher motivation. So setting forth the sankalpa is also the basis of yoga. Many of us have, we set forth some intention. We're going to go there. We're going to do this. But the sankalpa is relative to a sadhana that will be doing a practice, that will be changing ourselves. Raja Yoga is not about simply moving the body or even the prana differently. It's changing how we see the world, changing our attitudes, changing our emotions, like this opposite therapy at the level of the mind, the pratipaksha bhavana, replacing hatred with love, replacing fear with fearlessness, changing our idea of ourselves, changing our perception of the world. That is what Raja Yoga is about. And for example, but all yoga practices can be done at a physical level, a subtle level, or at a higher level. There is the great yogi and philosopher Adi Shankara has a very beautiful text called this Aparoksh Anubhuti, where he has a 15-fold Raja Yoga. And there he says that the true asana is resting in the ground of the supreme Brahman, the cosmic reality. You can be doing the lotus pose along with it, fine.
Yeah. Thank you. And just to make a comment and complete our conversation, which has gone over time, so thank you and value your time. I could keep going forever and ever. But with Raja Yoga, I thought I think it's nice to honor that psychiatrists and psychologists have been studying the mind for a long time. And so I felt that perhaps whilst Hatha Yoga is a little bit more focused on, we've got 8 limbs in Hatha Yoga, but people tend to attribute Hatha Yoga to physical postures and cleansing of the body and such, which it's not limited to that. But I do feel that Raja Yoga needs to be perhaps respected by the Western profession, and the Western profession could respect Raja Yoga, because I feel that they have been studying the mind for a very long time. And so in a way, they have been practicing Raja Yoga, which is control of the mind, or changing the way we perceive the world. I mean, I don't want to diminish the importance of Raja Yoga, but I want to acknowledge that these people...
Oh, yes. Well, you see, they're also using things like affirmations and change of attitudes and things like that. moving towards Raja Yoga. And the third part of the Hatha Yoga Pradipika is Samadhi, Raja Yoga, and Advaita Vedanta, or the yoga of knowledge. In fact, we should also, the last book I've done, this Yoga Beyond Body and Mind, has an extensive study of the works of Ramana Maharshi. I've been with him for a long time. And he has one of his texts, it's called Upadesha Saram, the essence of instruction. He goes through the whole development from the outer karma yoga to the inner self-inquiry and the importance of bhakti. Bhakti is also very important, where pranayama has its place, where asana has its place. There's a whole architecture, you might say, behind the yoga practice. And it's a cultural thing also. The scientist has a certain training and background. And it's important to integrate that in a yogic context. Yoga also has its own terminology. And unfortunately, some of these words now have other meanings than they originally have, and more dialogue between the psychologist and also some of the yogis and the gurus, and even the Ayurvedic way of dealing with the mind, because Ayurveda, mind-body medicine, even psychology recognizes you have to have a mind-body approach. You can't just simply, and you have to have an approach that is beyond simply chemicals. Chemicals have their place, particularly in acute conditions, sort of like antibiotics, but there are also other therapies and the importance of behavioral therapy. Medicine is moving in that direction. Yamas and niyamas, the ultimate psychological, behavioral therapy, ahimsa. It's not just a question of not wishing harm to others. It's not bringing harm into your mindset.
Yeah, that's
because
very
if you bring harm into your minds, you're the first to suffer from that, and you'll draw negative forces to you. Satya is not just simply telling the truth. It is the pursuit of the eternal truth, because only the eternal truth will take you beyond the ignorance of who you really are, yourself that is beyond time and space. These are also yamas and niyamas, are part of Raja Yoga, attitudinal, perceptual, behavioral changes. Sattva-guna heals the mind. Rajas and tamas are the doshas or disease-causing factors at the level of the mind. So there's much room. In fact, we had some nice discussions with the Harvard Medical School in Boston a few years ago, and there are obviously people looking into that. There are also physicists who have been looking into connections like Oppenheimer and the Gita and others, Einstein and so forth, and the mysticism there, and the search of a universal consciousness. And yoga says that consciousness pervades all space. Chitakasha. Prana pervades all space. Chit Shakti. There's a lightning force. Shakti is also lightning that pervades things. And so the universe is alive, and all these pranic, electrical, transformative forces are there, but they're a part of a deeper self-awareness. So much to do, and many correlations can be done. And in India today, there's a lot of work done in the high-tech field. Of course, you also have Silicon Valley in the United States. And the greater, in fact, in Ayurveda in India, they're putting more emphasis also on the psychological aspect of that. In fact, it has to be there. And of course, lifestyle goes along with that. So that also is something. And then even genetics. Genetics is important. But we also have what we call our karmic DNA. We come in with certain karmic potentials or sanskaras that are deeply rooted in the subtle body. That is why two children born in the same family with the same overall physical genetics can be very different characters and personalities. Sometimes we say that mantras can change the genetics of the subtle body. In any case, much to explore and much to do, but start out with what opens things up for you, and the magic of life the great cosmic powers are always there to help us if we are simply receptive and aware. We are not the center of the universe, but the center of the universe does dwell within us, and we can go there when we want to be one with all. Hari Om.
Hari Om. Thank you. Thank you, Vamadeva. Thank you, David Frawley, Dr. David Frawley, for being a wonderful yoga teacher, a wonderful yoga guru, and also a bringer of light to my life and many, many others, and also a wonderful doctor of Ayurvedic medicine.
Well, I'm very impressed by the organization that you have created. And I not only wish that it flourishes, but that it expands and creates similar centers and ideas and teachers and communications and classes throughout the world. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you. Take good care.
You too, and your students and everyone there. And let us bring the universe into all that we do in its Ananda.